Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. A very warm welcome to all to today's conversation around enhancing psychological safety at the workplace. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join in. With the rapid, with the global business environment rapidly changing and employee needs evolving, everyone is thinking about ways to further support their people's well-being at the workplace. During our time today, we hope to share some actionable steps that you can take back with you. My name is Samuel, Director of Business Solutions at Workplace Options Singapore, and I'm very excited to be the host and moderator for today's session. For attendees who may be new to Workplace Options, WPO is a leading global provider of employee well-being services. We focus on making a meaningful difference in individuals' personal and professional lives through our unique human-centric care approach. So before we begin, I'd like to take some time to introduce today's panel of expert speakers. We have Win Wee with us, who currently serves as the Vice President of Service Delivery for Asia Pacific at Workplace Options, and she oversees WPO's service center operations, clinical teams, and the broader clinical policies. Having joined Workplace Options in 2012, Win brings extensive experience among clinical, academic, and business settings, and has experience with a diverse clientele, including elderly individuals, adults, youths, and children with mental health issues and special needs. Welcome, Win. We
Thanks,
also
Sam.
have Bobby Teng, Neurolinguistics Programming Master Coach and Training Specialist at Workplace Options. He's an expert on incorporating psychology, counseling, and specialty techniques together with neuro-linguistics programming tools to deliver powerful and effective learnings. Bobby's area of expertise includes stress and emotional management, resilience, mindfulness, as well as supporting consulting initiatives for workplaces and businesses from a learning and development standpoint. Welcome, Bobby.
Hello.
Last but not least, we have Agnello Diaz, Director of Business Solutions at Workplace Options India. He currently oversees business development and channel partnerships within India and several neighboring countries, and holds over 10 years of experience in the mental health and well-being space. Agnello is a member of both the National HRD and Society of Human Resource Management Network in India. And with his deep understanding of common challenges faced by people managers, he collaborates with WPO's clients and partners to craft top-notch solutions that address the evolving needs of individuals. Welcome, Agnello.
Thanks, Sam.
So before we dive right into the topic, for members of the audience with any questions, please feel free to drop any Q&As you have in the chat box as we move along. And there will be some time catered for us to answer them before we conclude today's session. So really, thanks a lot for the panelists for taking time out today, as well as the audience to listen in. And to start us right off, probably a question for Win. What do we mean when we say psychological safety, and why is it important for us?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So obviously, that's the first topic we need to address before we can dive into today's discussion. So I'll begin by saying that the term psychological safety was coined 25 years ago in 1999 by a scholar and Harvard professor called Amy Edmondson. So it is, as a term, relatively new. However, the phenomenon is not new. Put simply, I would say psychological safety is the measure of a team or organization's cultural health indicator. Now, what does these three words mean? So a psychological safe workplace allows an individual to feel like they can be the most authentic version of themselves, where they can share ideas, ask questions, own up to mistakes, and seek help in an environment of mutual respect. And this is a very important part that I want to drive home, without the fear of repercussions. right? So just like how we would want to ensure our workplace is a physically safe place to work, we also want to ensure that our workplace is an emotionally safe place to work. So why is this important? Why did we choose to talk about this? So I want to be quite clear here that this is not about being nice or being soft, far from it. In fact, a psychologically safe workplace is important because research has shown time and again that psychologically safe teams perform better, experience higher retention, are more willing to give and receive feedback, own up to their mistakes, and come up with better ideas. And more than ever before, especially with our younger generation of employees, this is more scrutinized and sought after than ever. So if we think about it, a very common question that is asked in interviews is, oh, what's your company culture like? And if we think about it, what an individual is trying to assess when they're asking that question is, will this be a company that I will enjoy working for and with? So in a
Yeah,
nutshell, that is psychologically. Yeah.
I see. Thanks a lot, Vin. So really interesting. We have the idea of being able to come to the workplace feeling authentic, feeling safe, and really also being able to bring our best selves to the workplace. So really, I think it's really relevant to a lot of working professionals like ourselves, as a common topic that really we grapple with on a daily basis. So really curious, right? In your capacity as a mental health professional and practitioner, have you come across individuals requiring support to cope with those issues arising from the lack of psychological safety?
Unfortunately, the answer to that will be yes, every single day. And that's also why we decided to choose this topic to discuss and delve into today, because psychological safety is crucial, fundamental really, to the success of an organization, and a lot of the issues that we hear about stems largely from conflicts with one manager, right? Oftentimes, especially within the Asian context, we hear a lot of challenges around a manager who is directive and authoritarian. So someone who essentially doesn't want to be challenged, expects to be obeyed at every turn, and or a manager who wants to manage and control every detail of a decision or work, thereby giving impression to the employees that they don't trust them, to someone who just assumes the worst of the employees without trying to first understand the context of a situation before jumping to a conclusion of why something might have happened, without first building that rapport and connection with their team, before talking work, because that is so fundamental to all human relationships, even at work, right? So when these employees reach out to us, they're often feeling burnt out, they are dejected, demotivated, they feel highly unappreciated, and this leads to them feeling defensive and protective of themselves, right? And what I want all of us here to remember is that ultimately, all of us here, everyone, has a finite amount of energy to spend every day. So if this person has to spend a good part of their workday trying to protect themselves from criticism or from not incurring the wrath of their manager, they will then have less energy, less productive energy to then focus on being good at their actual jobs, where they can come up with better or new ideas or solutions to problems. So this is why this is so important.
Yeah, so really you have individuals worrying when they are not feeling psychologically safe, they are ruminating, they have a lot of what if questions coming into the workplace and really worrying about those situations, maybe feeling judged. And yeah, I absolutely agree. Very, very resonating with me when it comes to, experiencing that and feeling a little not safe, that I can't give everything my all. And there's some sort of an invisible barrier that's stopping that. Right. So
Mhm.
probably the next question, a question for Bobby. So how can we as individuals and leaders then help create a psychologically safe environment within our organizations?
Wow. And I think for that, honestly speaking, as individuals and leaders, creating a psychologically safe work environment, it's a shared responsibility. It's really not just about what leaders do. Each and every one of us actually plays a part. When we as individuals or peers, co-workers or colleagues takes the lead and make conversations about mental health safer and more open, we kind of set the tone for creating that psychologically safe workplace. I mean, in a study done by Google back in 2010 called Project Aristotle, the number one thing that they found in high performing teams, the key indicator was psychologically safety. And we as colleagues, co-workers, when we are willing to openly talk about some of the challenges that we might be facing, knowing that it's okay to show that we are vulnerable, it kind of signals to other team members that, hey, mental health is not something that we should beat around the bush or hide it. It's something that we can all address together. Having a peer-led approach is kind of essential to breaking the stigma around mental health at work. But don't take me wrong, leaders, of course, do have the responsibility to lead by example as well. I have seen firsthand how powerful it can be when a leader shares their own struggles or maybe they demonstrate things like empathy. It helps to open up the doors for others to feel safe sharing their own experiences. An interesting case that I handled quite a while ago was when a manager actually shared his mental health journey with his team, and it kind of sparked like a ripple effect where other team members started to feel more encouraged to talk openly about their own struggles. This actually led to better team cohesion and improve overall well-being. But it just doesn't stop there. Organizations need to support this through other initiatives like maybe employee resource groups, wellness programs, or even simply creating that space for these conversations to happen. So in a way, it's about equipping people with practical tools to manage the stress and the issues that they might be struggling with. And in some of the training sessions that I have led, I've actually seen how just simply providing these tools to the team can shift the entire culture of the organization. So to answer your question, building a psychologically safe work environment is kind of like a team effort. We need to work together. It's about being proactive, supporting one another, and making mental health a norm, talking about it, making it normal, having a safe and I guess cohesive work environment will actually improve the psychological safety.
Thanks, Bobby. Really interesting because when you think about it, when we go into the workplace, we have peers, leaders, co-workers who are all around us, and they are essentially part of our support system within the organization. Just similar to personal networks where we have a situation at home, we'll look to our friends, our family to support that situation, and get some advice, help, and support around that. So really interesting to know how we can create that culture of psychological safety within the organization with the peers and have authentic support from them. So probably next question to Agnolo, when we talk about well-being, right? For individuals who are passionate about well-being and want to contribute towards building a better workplace culture, how can organizations play a role in supporting them?
Thanks, Sam. And I think Vin and Bobby said it well. It's important to do, everything as an organization. And I believe organizations can play a crucial role in supporting employees who are passionate about well-being. It's not just about the HR or, the leaders, but also the employees. And from an organization's perspective, what we could do is the organization needs to be honest. It should encourage people to come up and share their mistakes, talk about their learnings, share their experiences. By doing this, it will show that, it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to, come out and share your thoughts, share your ideas. it actually helps build trust. Like when you're talking about creating a team, or you wanting to voice your opinions, if you know that there is no one who's going to ridicule you, or there is not going to be a backlash, you are going to be feeling safe in that environment. That's social safety for me. The other thing I would say is embracing diversity. And we have people from all walks of life working with us in the organization. It's important that you build a very inclusive environment. You talk about addressing biases, and you make everyone feel valued and heard. And by doing that, you are also recognizing the efforts of people who are working hard, who are contributing to the team. By again doing this, you are reinforcing a positive behavior. You're talking about including professional development. You're talking about including mental health topics. It will show that while the team is growing, you also care about the team. You're supporting your colleagues. You're offering you're here to be a good listener. On that topic, I also feel that building a strong team can actually enhance the psychological safety. If you see someone who is speaking up and who's sharing their thoughts on a regular basis, the others will also feel inspired. They will want to talk about it. They know that there is no backlash. And in my experience, my interaction with leaders in various domains, all I've wanted to know from them is what are they doing and how are they trying to bring in that positive change. We recently heard about an incident in India. I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but there were deaths of two young professionals in India, and it was work related. For the benefit of people who are not aware about those incidents, let me give you some background. So, a young employee who was working in a consulting firm, she passed away a few months back, and very recently, her family, opened up to the media saying that the death was because of work pressure. She had joined the organization just 4 months back and working in their audit team. Now we all know how cutthroat the client-facing part of the team is, and when you know that there are resources available, a lot of people ignore them, mainly because they are not even aware about them, or people are not there to encourage them to use those resources. Uh, the other incident that I can talk about is an employee, a bank manager or a mid-level employee working in a bank. She collapsed in the bank itself. She collapsed in the workplace. And when the investigations were done, the colleagues were asked about, how she was doing from a health perspective. They said, she was on leave for the past few days for blood pressure, but she was asked to resume work. It's still being investigated what the cause was, but we know that if resources are available, if you build a program which is able to address all these issues at workplace, you are able to mitigate some of these losses. You will be, to some extent, be able to reach out to people when it is required. On that note, I would talk about the program that we have. We recently launched the Ambassador program, which focuses on issues like these. It talks about assessment, talks about screening, training, certification, and then also provides a year-long support for people who are called ambassadors, who will go out and talk to people, basically provide a psychological first aid. And I understand that's what Vin mentioned when she first started. So I do believe that by taking these steps, organizations can create a culture where well-being is prioritized, and it can benefit both the employees and the organizations on a whole.
Yeah, Angelo. So it's also really about, not just that a psychologically safe workplace is a good to have. Essentially, what the cases that you shared are kind of telling us that it's something that is a must have, not only because it helps drive positive outcomes, but also it helps prevent risks or situations, the negative situations happening within the workplace. So that's really actually a really great insight. And so you mentioned the ambassador program as one of the initiatives that can be considered. We've been hearing a lot of that nowadays in the well-being space. So can you share a little more about that with us?
Sure. I can talk about the ambassador program all day, but I'll try and keep it brief. I'll try and give you some examples to better explain them. The ambassador program that WPO offers is primarily to educate employees, to train them as ambassadors who can go out and talk to employees and share their knowledge, and also encourage them to use the services. It's basically complementing the employee assistance program that we offer. And the ambassador program, is primarily composed of four individual services. The first is the well-being, then we do the screening, the training, and lastly, we provide ongoing support. As part of the assessment, what we do is we do surveys, we conduct interviews, we do focus groups, and identify people who are psychosocial, who can help people, from a psychosocial or a psychological perspective. It could be, someone is dealing with a workplace stress or a crossover. Someone is having going through a leadership change. You have a new team. You're looking at business stability. So how can you reach out to people? How can the transition be made easy? At the same time, we also look at people who have the time, who can actually contribute, and who value mental well-being in the first place, who can be these ambassadors. Once the screening is done, which while doing the screening itself, we look at the fit of the person, if they are able to fully understand what we want to deliver, what is the goal of the organization, what are going to be the roles and responsibilities of these people. And then we also look at location coordinators. So each location would have a location coordinator and a well-being ambassador. So the well-being ambassador doesn't have to go around and look for people. They can continue to do their job while the location ambassadors are also helping them, looking at volunteers who can come and talk to them. When we are doing the training, what we are looking to do is train these employees to obtain an IIRSM certification. Now, this certification or this training is highly engaging. There are various sessions which are conducted. There are various assessments which are conducted. And the primary goal of this is to recognize psychosocial distress. We also teach them how to identify people who are going through distress, what conversation that they can have, how they can not cross the boundary, how they can ensure that they are providing the first aid that is required, and then maybe do a referral to EAP services. Lastly, the ongoing support is where we have our clinicians or counselors who conduct various monthly group meetings. It's a virtual meeting where on a monthly basis, the ambassadors across various locations will meet each other. They will talk about, what are the cases that they're dealing with, how they were able to resolve those issues, share their ideas, share their best practices, and also we provide them other resources like we have a manager assist program, we have a manager handbook, which is basically helping the employees to understand what are the next steps. So to quickly give you an example, there was this client who wanted to build or invest in psychological health at the workplace, and they wanted us to demonstrate this for them. It was a very extensive training where we had all the managers in the organization that underwent training for psychological, to look at the positive side of what psychological safe environment would look at. And towards the end, Workplace Options was able to then identify people who were fit for the program, identify them as brand ambassadors or ambassadors for the program. The goal of the client was very simple. They wanted us to promote good mental health in the workplace, which is very important. The goal setting and what are your criterias. The second thing they told us that we want to break the stigma around mental health, and which is very prevalent in the Asian context. Wherever you go, people ask me what is the utilization like. How many people are actually wanting to use the service. What about the stigma around the service? So the organization was very clear. Lastly, they said they were looking at ambassadors who were selected based on the criteria, which said that without disturbing their work, they will be able to volunteer for this particular program. So, whatever capacity they had, they were able to bring that out and talk about it. The phases were various. We had the planning phase where we looked at the overall program. We had initial discussions. We had the conversations. We did the assessments. We also included the health, the safety, security, and environment team in the organization when we were conducting these surveys. And then we looked at the training the ambassadors. What was the goal that we had in mind? The first training that we did was the zero harm management training or the initiative, which was to provide the organization with the basic awareness about emotional and psychological factors that could impact an individual. uh, this training also made the managers aware of how well-being ambassadors in the workplace could actually support the employees. So the context was set in the first place, and then when we did the deployment, we ensured that each location had an ambassador, a program coordinator. As I said, the program coordinator typically acts as the primary contact, and they will be the ones who will be supporting the ambassadors. Again, once we were done, on a monthly basis, we were having these meetings. Overall, I can tell you that as a result of deploying this particular program, we were able to understand, or the employees were able to understand, of the importance of having a mental health first aid and what was the role of an ambassador in that context. They were able to explore, what were the stigmas, how employees were being discriminated, and how you can prevent it from happening. How you can talk about mental health openly. How you can proactively start a conversation with an employee without really making them feel that they are being picked up, or how you can ensure that there's a professional boundary where you don't want to breach. You want to talk about mental health, but at the same time you just don't want to call out someone. So then we also had the emergency protocol, where in case of an emergency, what do we do? How do we reach out to the emergency responders? So this is the kind of support that we talked about. And lastly, what Will mentioned, we were also talking about the energy management of the employees. So ensuring that, by doing this, they were not exhausting themselves, because it can be very toxic. It can be, when you're talking to someone about their mental health issues, you need to be empathic. Instead of, you showing sympathy, you need to show that you are empathic and you're not taking it back to your bed. You are keeping it there itself. So that's how we were able to train them.
Thanks, Angelo. So essentially, when we look at, putting together a concerted effort for the organization or the workplace, it's not only just letting individuals know or educating them and creating awareness, but it's also about empowering individuals in the workplace or specific individuals who are able to kind of lead that effort, and drive those changes within the organization. And we are really talking about, empowering them with the resources, with the knowledge, with the skill sets, as well as the additional role, right? When they themselves are the well-being ambassadors, they themselves are championing the mental health cause in the workplace to look after themselves as well, because that's also an additional role. So probably next question for Bobby, as the learning and development specialist. So Angelo mentioned about the training, and Bobby, could you share more about what are some considerations when we talk about planning and executing an ambassador training? How does it differ from a regular mental health training or seminar in the first place?
And that's actually a really, really great question. So, when planning or executing an ambassador training, there are several key considerations that actually makes it distinctively different from a regular mental health seminar or a talk, or even a psychological first aid training. It starts off with the clarity of the role. We need to talk about what is a mental health ambassador. Ambassadors are not mental health professionals, but they kind of act like the eyes and ears of the organization. These ambassadors should be trained to promote mental health awareness, to identify when someone who may need additional support and reach out to them and guide them to get the appropriate resources that they may actually benefit from. I mean, in contrast to normal mental health talks and seminars, it's usually more towards like general awareness, and psychological first aid focuses on things like crisis intervention. It's important to consider maybe some of the learning needs of the ambassadors, because they all come from very diverse roles and departments within the organization. Some may need a little bit more training on things like mental health basics, or some may need to enhance their communication skills. Tailoring or customizing the content to their level of understanding and comfort is essential. And on top of that, the profile of the ambassador matters, like Agnolo mentioned earlier. These ambassadors are actually often trusted individuals within the organization, which means that they need training that reflects their day-to-day realities and even work interactions. Ambassadors has to be equipped with strong skills in active listening and empathy. And this goes beyond what we normally cover in a typical mental health seminar or a talk. Ambassadors needs to be comfortable handling sensitive conversations, being able to spot early signs of stress or burnout, and knowing when to actually step in and refer someone to reach out for professional help. So a big part of the ambassador training is aligning the content with the organization's policies, culture, and even best practices. For example, in high stress industries, role plays and case studies can actually simulate real life situations for ambassadors who might face it down the road. And we also look at some of the organizational policies and wider resources, like, for example, the Employee Assistance Program, where they can get 24/7 mental health support through the service, and how we can actually integrate that into the training so that the ambassadors can have a clearer understanding of how to navigate some of these support systems effectively. And there's also the component of trust. Trust is a huge part of the ambassador training. Ambassadors needs to foster a sense of safety and confidentiality so that employees can actually feel comfortable when they reach out to them. So this is different from a broader seminar where confidentiality may not be as heavily emphasized on. In the ambassador training, we focus on building interpersonal skills that ensures that when people are having conversations, they feel safe. And unlike one-off seminars, the ambassador training actually focuses on things like continuous ongoing support within the organization as well. Ambassadors are meant to serve as ongoing points of contact and not just in moments of crisis, but in day-to-day situations. This helps to cultivate a long-term culture of mental well-being. Another crucial consideration would be what happens after the training. And as Agnolo has mentioned earlier, yes, we have ongoing coaching, peer support, or even refresher sessions for ambassadors who have been trained a while ago. This will help these ambassadors feel supported and equipped to carry out their roles. So organizations should also think about how they can sustain this initiative through regular check-ins within the organizations itself, or even providing these ambassadors with access to updated mental health resources. So in short, the ambassador training is all about empowering these individuals. It's like trying to formalize the peer support that I was mentioning earlier and having this title to create a culture of inter colleague support. Whereas if we're looking at seminars or psychological first aid trainings, these tend to be more focused on just broadening the education and knowledge or focusing on things like crisis intervention.
Thank you both.
Ambassadors Yes, sorry. Ambassadors are meant to act as signpostings for people to reach out for additional support or help.
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting because when you think about training for ambassadors, so what you mentioned is essentially preparing ambassadors for a specific role, for specific objective that will help the respective individuals. Because regularly, unlike talking to your peer where you are going to someone and saying, hey, this, let me tell you something, but please keep it between us. There's always that, that missing sense of confidentiality, and you're also not sure whether he or she is the right person to go to, or whether you yourself is the right person to come to within the workplace in the first place, right? So ambassador training essentially prepares individuals for that. And really interesting because when you think about the training, then that goes into the communication, the positioning of the ambassadors within an organization, and then also equipping them with these skills to be able to kind of bring that mental health and well-being strategy through the organization. So then probably the next question for Win, apart from empowering individuals within the organization to champion and advocate mental health, what else do you think could organizations do to reinforce their well-being strategy?
Yeah, so that's a good follow-up question, Sam. I mean, Emilio and Bobby have already touched a lot on what companies can do. For me, what I think that is very, very important is that whatever is done has to be done authentically and is not just performative and is not just lip service. Because it's very easy to just throw a program at the employees and throw a solution of wellness at the employees and say, okay, here, I've put this there, I've implemented it, now I can walk away and things will happen magically. No, right? It's nothing like that. It needs to be lived in every single decision that is made within the organization, right? With every single interaction that happens between individuals. And it always starts with leadership, right? Like it or not, people look to leaders. If somebody in the leadership team behaves badly, people look to that more than if it's just any other individual. And in fact, a study done by the Workforce Institute of UKG found that close to 70% of employees actually said that their manager single-handedly has the greatest impact on their level of well-being and their sense of mental health. And we think about it, that is a huge percentage. It's not their spouse, it's not the doctor, it is their manager. So that is how influential leadership can be within the organization. So the organization's job then is to equip leadership with the right skills to support and look after their employees. So obviously there are multiple things that can be done. So of course, like Bobby talked about in great detail, the ambassador program, that is very valuable and great to have, but also it needs to be lived authentically and consistently in the other parts of the organization, such as with the leadership, right? And it also will not be reasonable to say, okay, you're a manager, so you should know how to manage this. You should know how to manage a difficult conversation. You should know how to notice when one of your employees is not doing well. You should be able to have difficult conversations, right? You should know how to foster a team with psychological safety. Of course, that's not true, right? It comes with skills building. It comes with practice and, some of the things that organizations can help with is by offering trainings that can give these managers the basic tools on what they need to learn to ensure that they are as well organically the ambassadors of mental health and wellness. Not just saying, oh, that's the ambassador's job, not my job. My job is to be the manager. It's not true, right? We all, every single one of us, no matter our role in the organization, has a part to play in promoting and talking and normalizing the importance of mental health. So some of the topics that we do provide trainings on and coaching on is around how managers can manage conflicts, how they can give and receive feedback, how can they adopt a more like people-centric leadership style. A very common one is very popular is how do you spot when an employee is struggling? And more importantly, what do you do about it after that? Because a lot of managers go, oh no, I think there's something wrong with my team member. He doesn't seem well. He used to be very put together. Now he comes to work and he's all disheveled. I don't want to say anything to him because I think it might make things worse. Because I don't know what to say. What if I say the wrong thing? So I'm not going to say anything, right? That's a very common reaction in some of the Asian managers that we see. And we see, no, actually, it's very important, like for you to say something, to go to the person and say, are you okay? What's happening? Is there anything you can do to help? And encouraging them to seek support, because it's difficult, right? In the Asian population, there is still stigma around mental health, even though that has changed, you know, in the last few years, especially with the pandemic. But when it comes to individuals, they still feel hesitant to reach out for support. They still feel like it is something perhaps to be ashamed of or embarrassed of. And of course, we know among us that's not true, right? And the manager has a big part to say to that, to say, are you okay? And to normalize being vulnerable. And that's something a manager can do as well, you know, to show their own vulnerability when they are not going through a good space themselves, to be able to say, I had a really bad day because this, you know, happened. And so I want to be mindful of, you know, how I interact with you guys today. And something that is as simple as that can have a very powerful effect on the team. You know, some other topics that would be useful for managers to and leadership to really be well acquainted with is how do you adopt a more coach approach to management, you know, where you are a bit more collaborative rather than I say this, so you do it because I'm your boss, you know, which doesn't sit well, especially in the generation of today. You know, they don't respond well to that. And as we all know, the age of our employee is decreasing, it's getting younger and younger, and the way that is effective to communicate with them also needs to change and be different. So overall, my main thing that I want, you know, every one of us here to take away is that whatever we do, it has to be done authentically, and it has to be done with purpose and not just be a tagline, or it can't just be performative.
Wow, Winnie, I think you definitely hit the nail on the head with, I'm not sure if the audience agree, but personally, I think those are very real challenges that organizations are facing. Situations or challenges where we talk about, you know, managers, whether they are equipped to support the people, as well as, you know, the challenges of managing a multi-generation workforce within the current environment. Those are very real situations where, you know, we are trying to figure out how to navigate that, and managers or leaders may not always know what to do, and that's pretty okay. But really, it's also about trying to figure out where do we go from here, and what else can we do? Yeah,
Yeah, so
and
what I
so
want to clarify here too, Sam, sorry for
sure.
interrupting, but what I want to clarify here too is I'm not at all saying that managers need to then be well equipped at having these difficult conversations if somebody is going through like depression or anxiety or a really hard time. You know, aside from just saying, are you okay? And, you know, what else can we do for you as a company, as a team? They can then encourage the employee to reach out for more professional support through the EAP. And on top of that, they as managers can reach out for support themselves. You know, they can call into their EAP service if they have one to say, you know, I'm really struggling. I really want to support this employee of mine, but I am afraid to say the wrong thing. And that's a very natural and normal fear, to be able to speak to that professional, to talk through what are some of the appropriate and, you know, helpful, constructive things they can say to their team to help them and to support them through a difficult situation, or if they are struggling with difficult conversation they need to have, you know, they can seek out the EAP for support as well on how best to have that conversation.
Yeah, yeah, always great to leverage on any resources that the organization has. So I'll probably also like to direct this question to Angelo. So other than, you know, what we've talked about the EAP support, we've talked about the ambassador program. What else do you know can kind of support, provide better support for organizations when it comes to well-being? Angelo?
It looks like we might have lost connection with him for a bit.
Sure, thank you. And well, I do believe it's not a box. It's not a one-time investment program, and now it's going to work well. People are going to use it. Uh, there's a saying, out of sight, out of mind. Unless and until you don't promote it, unless and until you don't enforce it, from a management perspective, it's going to be very, very difficult. So I do believe that organizations can take several steps to reinforce this, this strategy of overall well-being, how you can promote it. Firstly, I think it's important that when you have an AAP program, you know that there is a fallback, there is a backup available for your employees. It's important to encourage. One of those ways to encourage is the Wellbeing Ambassador program. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but that's a very effective way to do it, where you have professionals who are able to encourage employees to go and seek support. And I do believe that yes, employees or managers are not in a position to provide the counseling, but they are there in a position to help the employees. Sam, are you able to see
I
me?
think,
No, I think we
no,
lost Agnew.
yeah, I think we lost him.
Can you see me?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
welcome back.
Um, Thank you. So yeah, I know that it's not the only way. I don't know where you lost me, but let me say this. Let me put it together. It's important that you promote the services. It's important that you talk about the services, and it's also important that you provide the support which is necessary for your employees and managers to do well. There are various trainings which are available for employees. You can talk about flagship trainings like resilience, mindfulness, intelligence. From a manager's perspective or a leader's perspective, you have your burnout, or you have effective communication, something which is the need of the hour. Lastly, organizations, and this is something that a lot of organizations are doing these days, where they have a counselor who's deployed on site. We call it the Amplify program, where you're amplifying, your counselors. You are able to provide a comprehensive service within the walls of the organization, within the premise itself. People can just walk in, go and talk to the counselor. It could be in the moment support. It could be wanting to, schedule a session for later, talking about, how you're feeling today. What is your mood like? Organizations also conduct mindfulness sessions as part of this program. And lastly, roundtable conferences where you have discussions. You create an open forum where people are from various walks of life, from various divisions, from various departments, from various hierarchy, come and talk about their experience. And unless and until you provide a platform as an organization, I think it's going to be, exactly where it was in the pre-pandemic era. During the pandemic, we did see a spike. However, now we are seeing, it flattening or narrowing down. So it's important that you do more. I have a client, in fact, in the content moderation industry, and they tell me that, the program is working absolutely fine for them. They have counselor who is available 4 hours a day, twice or thrice a week, and people can just walk in. They now have built such a relationship with them that they don't even need to, think about what they are going to talk about. They are confident that whatever they speak in those sessions, it's confidential. It's between the counselor and the employees, and they feel that yes, now because of this particular program, they are seeing employees who are moderating content which can be very, very difficult or distressing, coming out and just saying that, hey, I saw something like this. I don't know how to, take it out of my mind. And it's important. You have a counselor who's available who, it's like a fallback option. If you met with an accident, the first thing that you'd want to do is go and see, the ambulance, or you want to go and see the hospital. Here you have a hospital right in your doorstep. I'm just putting it in a context where you have a psychological counselor who's providing you that mental health first aid in the environment, in the office itself. So there are various things that we can do, but in short, I think combining some of these approaches, organizations can say that yes, this is a comprehensive way or an effective way of reaching out to the employees, or providing a platform for the employees, or enhancing the overall culture of well-being in the organization.
Thanks, Agnew. Really interesting when you talk about content moderation, right? Having people, having professional support, those frontline employees. Because if you think about it, as employees of an organization, we are not only facing stresses that are coming from within, interaction with the colleagues or conflicts, for example, but we're also dealing with external stressors, right? When we talk about interacting with the organization's customers, interacting with the organization's vendors, stakeholders, and external parties. And there's a lot of stresses coming in from that as well. I do want to share one news that I heard recently. So South Korea, they've had a really big situation where teachers are facing the brunt of a lot of students, and they're facing a lot of stress from the industry, and essentially there's a lot of issues with that. So I think, having professional support, having professional help on site as well, that's really great ease of access for them. So I know we're nearing the end of the session. I do want to check in the chat box for any questions. To the attendees again, or for our audience, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them now. If otherwise, I'll just hold on for a while before we have any questions. Okay, so we have one question. So probably here, one question for Bobby. So you mentioned the employee resource group. Can you share a little about how that fits within an organizations?
Oh, wow, that's a really interesting question. Employee resource groups are basically voluntarily employee-led groups that focuses on shared characteristics, interests, or even experiences among the team members. So having employee resource groups within the organization allows the culture of trust to build. They build that psychological safety by fostering trust among the team members. So when actually individuals feel safer to share their thoughts and experiences when there are employee resource groups around, because these groups actually helps to reduce the stigma, and it encourages open discussion on mental health. Some employee resource groups may be as simple as just wellness groups, walking groups, lunch groups, shopping groups, and within the groups themselves, they can share their stories, their challenges, their experiences. And the members within the employee resource groups may even be able to demonstrate vulnerability, which, like we've mentioned earlier in today's topic, being able to share your vulnerabilities actually inspires others to do the same. People can then model the openness and try to normalize conversations about mental health or even psychological well-being when there are more employee resource groups within the organization.
Thanks, Bobby. Really interesting to have, employees coming together, talking about specific topics and sharing their information. So personally, I'm also curious, probably perhaps a last question for Win. When you see employees coming together in these peer support groups, how do you think organizations can empower those conversations within those groups?
Well, that's a good question. And really, as Bobby was speaking, the word that came to my mind really strongly was community, right? I think having that sense of community, feeling a sense of belonging, is more powerful than we realize. And that is something that we value as an Asian society, the sense of community, because we are a collectivistic culture. So having this strong sense of community at work, knowing that even if I have a bad day, even if I had a tough day at work, if I had to deal with a difficult client, I can go back to my group and vent to them and find a bit of respite and space to just channel that energy into a bunch of people who will care about me and my situation can do a lot. And it's simple, so it is a shame that, we don't, I think in general, most organizations don't leverage on that enough. And what organizations can do really is to, one, ensure that people know that this is an option for them, and giving them the basic resources for these groups to run efficiently, right? Because if we think about it, if they channel some of the resources into allowing these groups to flourish and to grow, this will in turn improve the level of engagement of the employees with their co-workers. It will then lead to further engagement with their teams and the organization. And all of this lends to the bigger picture of lower attrition, higher engagement, and just people who are happier, people who are more satisfied, people who are well, do better at work. And it's as simple as that. So whatever we can do to lend to that is meaningful, in my opinion.
Thanks, Win. Yep. So really great when you talk about thinking about every little effort in the workplace could potentially make a ripple in the organization and really creating that pass on impact. And then everybody else sees that, hey, this is happening. Mental health support or feeling mentally healthy is the norm. Then that's where you have everybody joining in on the conversation as well. So really great insight. So I know we are near the end. Thanks a lot for the panelists discussion, joining us and sharing some of your insights. For the audience, we have two handouts. We have a couple of handouts that are being shared. So take a look at that. And if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And we hope that today's session has been great and helpful for you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.